Hello, my name is Tyler Engelman, and today I'm going to talk about the Battle of Trafalgar, why it took place, and the impact that it had on the world. Before we can get into talking about the battle itself, we have to have a brief introduction of what it was. The Battle of Trafalgar was a naval battle that took place between the British and the French and Spanish navies on October 21st, 1805. But first, let's talk about the context of the events that led up to it. Our story begins on August 15th, 1769, on a tiny island to the west of Italy that's called Corsica, where Napoleon Bonaparte was born. In 1785, when Napoleon was 16, he joined the French army, and during the French Revolution, he climbed the ranks in the army quickly. During the War of the First Coalition, Napoleon was put in charge of French soldiers in Italy to fight off the Austrians. Battle after battle, Napoleon and his men defeated the Austrians. And after sieging the city of Mantua, the Austrians were forced to sign the Treaty of Campo Formio, which made them make peace with France. This successful campaign in Italy gained Napoleon a lot of popularity back home in France. During the War of the Second Coalition, Napoleon invaded Egypt. The main reason why Napoleon invaded Egypt was to economically strain Great Britain by cutting off its trade routes with Great Britain's most prized colony, India. After having some initial success, Napoleon was eventually defeated by a combination of Ottoman and British forces. And due to the British Admiral Horatio Nelson sinking the majority of the French navy in Egypt during the Battle of the Nile, when Napoleon fled Egypt, he had to leave most of his soldiers behind. After the War of the Second Coalition ended, Napoleon took the time to seize power for himself. In 1799, Napoleon led a coup against the Directory, which was the government of France at the time. This coup was a success, and Napoleon became the consul, or ruler of France. 5 years later, in 1804, Napoleon expanded his power by crowning himself as the Emperor of France. In 1803, 1 year prior to becoming emperor, Napoleon had invaded Switzerland, which sparked the British to declare war on France. By 1805, the War of the Third Coalition was in full force, with the British, Swedish, Austrians, Russians, and Sardinian Piedmontese teaming up together to fight the French and the Spanish. During this war, Napoleon desperately wanted to invade Britain, but he had a slight problem. Britain was an island nation with a powerful navy that just as desperately wanted to not be invaded. In order to invade Britain, Napoleon needed to draw out the British navy from the English Channel, and to do so he had a plan. Napoleon sent the French and the Spanish navies under the command of Admiral Villeneuve to attack British possessions in the Caribbean. Napoleon hoped that these attacks would force the British Royal Navy to go to the Caribbean, and it did. Once the British Navy reached the Caribbean, Villeneuve was instructed to quickly bring the French and the Spanish navies back to the city of Boulogne so they could support this invasion of England. Villeneuve didn't do this. Instead, Villeneuve took the navy to the Spanish port of Cadiz, which forced Napoleon to call off the invasion. Upon hearing word that the French and Spanish navies were docked at Cadiz, the British Admiral Horatio Nelson took the British Navy and chased after them. After being in Cadiz for around a month, Napoleon was fed up with Villeneuve. His failure to take the navy to Boulogne had completely ruined his planned invasion. And in September, when Napoleon had ordered Villeneuve to leave Cadiz and go to the city of Naples in Italy to support an invasion there, Villeneuve just didn't do it and stayed in Cadiz. In October, Villeneuve had gotten word that Napoleon was sending a new admiral to Cadiz in order to replace him. Not wanting to be replaced, though, Villeneuve finally took action and prepared the navy to leave Cadiz and sail to Naples. Unfortunately for Villeneuve, his navy was made up of a lot of inexperienced sailors, and the consequence of such was that it took them 2 days to leave the harbor. Between taking a long time to leave the harbor and being in the harbor for months. This gave the British Royal Navy enough time to catch up to the French and the Spanish. On the day that the French and the Spanish left Cadiz, the British Navy attacked. Let's take a moment to analyze the commanding admirals. Leading the French and the Spanish navies, we have Admiral Villeneuve. Villeneuve started his naval career as a regular ensign during the American Revolution. By the time of the Second Coalition War, Villeneuve had worked up the ranks and had become the commander of the rear division, and in fact, only his and one other French ship managed to escape the British during the Battle of the Nile, due to Villeneuve's unwillingness to engage the British. This allowed him to climb the ranks even further, and by the time of the Third Coalition War, where we are now, he was the Vice Admiral. Overall, Villeneuve wasn't the greatest leader. In a letter, Napoleon said that Villeneuve does not possess the strength of character to command a frigate. He lacks determination and has no moral courage. Hence, why Napoleon sought to replace him. Ruling over the British Navy, we have Admiral Horatio Nelson. Back at home, Nelson was considered a hero due to his part in sinking the French fleet during the Battle of the Nile. Nelson was also greatly respected by Napoleon himself. In fact, Napoleon respected Nelson so much that he had a miniature statue of Nelson displayed on his table at home. Overall, Nelson was a highly competent admiral. Here's a map that shows you where the Battle of Trafalgar takes place. As you can see, the French and Spanish didn't get far before being intercepted by the British in the Cape of Trafalgar, which is where the battle gets its name from. Now let's take a moment to compare what resources both sides had during the battle. On the French and Spanish side on the left, there were 33 ships of the line, 5 frigates, and 2 brigs, all being manned by 35,000 sailors. These ships were considered to be of higher quality than the ships that the British had at the time. Looking at the British side, the British were outnumbered. They only had 27 ships of the line, 2 frigates, a schooner, and a cutter. They also only had 20,000 sailors. But the sailors they did have were generally more experienced than their French and Spanish counterparts. Just to get an idea of what these boats looked like, this is the HMS Victory today, which is the same exact ship that Admiral Nelson was on during the Battle of Trafalgar. Now that we know what each side was fighting with, we can get into the battle. In the red and yellow, we have the French and Spanish ships, and in the blue, we have the British ships. Villeneuve's strategy going into the battle was to line up all of his ships together so they could fire the cannons at the British ships at once. On the other hand, Nelson split his fleet into 2 different columns. Each column was tasked to cut into the lower part of the French line, separating them from the rest of the French fleet. Famously, Nelson signaled the order to attack by saying, "England expects that every man will do his duty." Well, who won the battle? Britain did, and they won it by a lot. During the battle, the French and the Spanish were absolutely crushed. 4,395 French and Spanish soldiers were killed, which was almost 10 times more than the number of British killed, only 458. On top of that, the French and the Spanish had twice as many men wounded, 2,541 compared to the British 1,208. 7 to 8,000 of Villeneuve's men were taken prisoner, 21 French and Spanish ships were captured, and 1 was sunk. And during the battle, not a single British ship was sunk or captured. Now let's talk about the fate of Villeneuve. Ironically, the Battle of Trafalgar led to the deaths of both Villeneuve and Nelson. During the battle, Villeneuve was captured by the British and taken prisoner. Eventually, the British released him and he went back to France, where Villeneuve requested to be let back into the Navy. Villeneuve never got a response. Villeneuve was found dead in a hotel next to a suicide note, and an official investigation ruled that he had committed suicide. But many historians believe he was murdered instead. Either way, Villeneuve had met his end. In his legacy, his name is carved into the Arc de Triomphe, which you can see here in this image. Nelson's fate was a lot more clear. During the Battle of Trafalgar, he was shot by a French sniper while on the deck of his ship. Nelson ordered a few of his men to take him below deck and to cover up his face, so that his men wouldn't lose morale seeing their admiral injured. Before Nelson died, he knew that he had successfully defeated the French Navy and that he had kept Britain safe from an invasion. Back home in Britain, he was hailed as a hero, a legend even. Britain honored him by burying him in St. Paul's Cathedral, which is pictured here. Napoleon also honored him. After Nelson's death, Napoleon had a French translation of Nelson's famous line, "England expects that every man will do his duty," put on each ship in his navy. Granted, he changed the word England to France. Now let's talk about the impact. The Battle of Trafalgar had a huge impact. But Britain beating the French in the Third Coalition War was not a part of it. What the battle did do, however, was it prevented Napoleon from ever invading Britain. It also allowed Britain to remain as the uncontested naval superpower of the world for over a century. That's the end of my presentation on the Battle of Trafalgar. I hope you enjoyed it. Here are all of the sources that I used to gather information and images for my presentation. So here's the first page, the second page, and the third and final page. Thank you for watching my video. Bye-bye.